Okay, so let's look at the coding behind all of this. I'll also take you through what I was talking about previously on unsorted and sorted tables. So let's go through that first. So here's an example I've got of a set of names for a high score. I've got a set of names which are in order, which we've just seen, and I've got a set of scores in order. So this is an ordered list. This will work with an insertion sort because it's already sorted. Now, I've got this on numbers 20, 18, 16, 5 and 0. The sort is not on the person's name. Now that is going to be a little bit more complicated than we're going to play with in our program. We're just going to sort on the name. We will look at how to do the numbered version later, but it is a little bit more complex. Not too much, but enough to make you stop and think. So that is a sorted list because the numbers are in sorted order from high to low. So that's a high score table. This we cannot use because, again, the data is not sorted in any sort of way. So we've got 3 at the top, then 18, then 21, then 0. It really doesn't make a great deal of sense. If we were to use this file, which would be okay, it would start sorting things into order. So for example, if Clive scored 5, it would put Clive between Jodie and Jim. 3, 5, 18, and that would be good. However, if sort of, I don't know, let's think of a name, Zach scored 22, it would place Zach between Monica and James. The list wouldn't be sorted because James would be 0. Really, James needs to be put at the start. We cannot do that with an insertion sort. It will not work. It will always stay in this order and place correctly, but incorrectly, the name in the list. So we'd need another kind of sort, like a bubble sort or something, to sort this list before we played with it. Fortunately, we're going to be working with lists which are empty to begin with, so as we insert items into the list, they will always be in sorted order and will give us something that looks like this. So we won't start with a list that's not in any sorted order. And basically what we're going to be doing is playing around with just names. As I've said, the scores with numbers on the end is a little bit more complicated, so the program that I'm going to show you just deals with the names. We will look at how to do the scores a little bit later. I've got these files. I'll probably need to delete these before I actually do any programming. So Python, where are we? I don't seem to have Python up and running. There we go. So what I want to do really is take a look at this slide here. I've shown you how to design these. So take the diagram, the labels on the diagram, and turn that into a program with 1 or 2 sort of what I call caveats. In other words, there's some things that you may need to do. It's not just a straightforward look at the words and place them in there. We may have to set some variables, otherwise our program will crash when we begin. So let's start. This is our function in the box, and the function's name is insertion sort. So I can do that in Python with a def for the box, and then the words that are on the box, insertion sort, which is good. And then what I really need to do is look at what it takes in, data and item, and they need to go inside parenthesis, brackets, in the function, what we call the function header. All of this is called the function header. Now it's going to return a data item. So if I just press enter and type return data, I have now done all the programming that was labelled on the box. However, it may crash when we run it. Data is certainly okay because it takes in a value data and returns it, so it knows what that is. It doesn't really know what item is, but it doesn't do anything with it. So we may get away with the program just running from this point with nothing happening. So if I save it, that was file handling. Let's go to sorting. And let's call this sort. Do not call it insertion sort because that is the name of your function, and you may get an issue with duplicate names. Insertion sort here and insertion sort here. So if I just put sort 1.py as my file name, that should be okay. And if I run it by pressing F5 or choosing run, there we go. It's fine. It's happy. So everything we've done is perfect. What I am going to do though is give it a couple of items in my main program. Now my main program always starts after the function declarations, and I'm just going to put a comment here to say this is when my main program starts, and I'm just going to set data and item, and I'm going to do a little call to it. So data to begin with is empty. It's a table with no values in. So therefore I just use the open and close square brackets to say it's empty. The name that I want to put in really doesn't matter. I'm going to call it item to match this. It's not a very good idea, but as we're learning to develop, it will suffice. Item equals, let's take the name that we were using earlier, Frank. There we go. And then all we need to do is call this insertion sort. Now the reason why I've set these up, and I'll show you in a minute, the reason why I've set these variables up is to A, call it and make something work, but B, make sure that I've got the call correct. So what comes out is data. Okay, so it's returning data. I'm catching data here, and we're looking at the fact that it's returning data. Data now equals, so it was empty, it's now going to contain a list with just Frank in, hopefully, but I just call my function insertion sort, and I send in data and item. So this is where you have to be careful. These need to match. So data needs to be the first one. Item needs to be the second one. You could switch them around. So item could be first and data could be second. So we could do this. If we did, whoops. If we did, we would need to switch them around here as well. They need to match. If we don't match, then we're going to get an error at least, if not lots more problems. So I'll just leave it like that. It really doesn't matter. But what I wanted to show you before I go any further is if I comment these two out, because I'm calling my function here insertion sort with item and data, and we saw that it was okay up here. Whoops, it won't if I call it iData. We saw it was okay here when we ran it. It just ran with no errors. This time it's going to give me an error, and it's going to say, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean by item, and I don't understand what you mean by data. You haven't told me about them yet. You haven't declared them. And that's because we're in this main block. Okay? And they haven't been declared. I've just commented them out here. In this block of code up here, I'd already specified what they were, so it was happy. But I haven't in this one. It's got no idea what data and item are. So if I save and run this program, let's run it again, run module, it's going to crash saying, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean by the word item. You haven't told me what it is. So if I uncomment item out there, and again run it, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to crash with an error message saying, you haven't told me anything about data. So run it again. There you go. You haven't told me anything about data. It's not defined. Please define it. So if I take those comments out, now it's going to be happy. Now it's going to call the function with item and data and know what those two things are. One's going to be an empty list, one's going to be the word Frank, and it's not going to crash. So if I now run it, it's not going to do anything, it's just going to be happy. There we go, it's happy, it's not crashed. So that's the start. That is taking our diagram here and turning it into a function header or a function stub, and then setting up some test data to check it out. Do it as you go along, so that you know, if you've got errors, you can quickly sort them out, rather than have a whole program and then trying to wonder where the error is, because it's not always the case that the error message you get will be on the line that it indicates. It might be beforehand, so try to check as you go along. Also, it's fewer lines of code for you to say, oh, well, I've only typed 5 lines of code, it can only be in one of those 5 lines. So that's our start. What we're going to do now is we're going to go through the rest of the insert sort routine. We're going to leave the main program alone, not do anything with it. Actually, we could do one thing with it. We could just print out the data so that we can see what it is. And again, if I run that, click OK, then it just prints an empty list because we haven't changed it inside here. It's useful because now we can see what happens when we make any sort of change in our program. So in the next video, we're going to start padding out this box with some of the rules that we mentioned here. The considerations, what happens when the table is empty, and what happens when we reach the end of the table and we haven't found where to insert the data yet.